All right, folks. So we've got every remaining Darkmoon Races card revealed. This video closes it out. They started coming hot and fast throughout the course of the day. So let's kick this off, and we're going to go a little quicker this time because there's a lot of cards. This is Dark Inquisitor Xanesh, a 5 mana 3/5 for Priest with a battle cry. Reduce the cost of all corrupt cards in your hand and deck by 2. This is completely bonkers to me. Priest already has a nice set of corrupt cards, some great neutral corrupt cards. You could build the deck here with, I don't know, 10, 15 corrupt cards very easily, I'm sure, maybe even more than that. And that means you're realizing a ridiculous mana discount. And the cool thing is, when you discount corrupt cards, of course, they become easier to corrupt. And that means you're going to get all these corrupted cards really easily. And then Yasharaj, I can't even imagine how much insane value is potential there. It's just a lot. It's so crazy. I'm actually looking up how many corrupt cards you can get in Priest because I feel like I said too many, but now I don't know. So let me double check. So there's 3 Priest corrupt cards. That's a total of 6. Oh, there's a ton of neutral corrupt cards. You can run a million. Yeah. So 10 or 15 easy, right? So 30 plus mana is no problem at all for the Dark Inquisitor Xanesh. Now, of course, this is a legendary minion, which means he's a one-of, which means you're not always going to have him in hand, certainly by turn 5. Sometimes he might not come in until much, much later in the game. And then are your corrupt cards and corrupt game plan enough to get you by until then, or did you like kind of throw away your win condition? That's always the problem for cards like this one. But I feel like the power spike potential on Xanesh is so high when you do hit him early. And if you can try to tutor him out of your deck, I don't know how that's going to work super well when you have some corrupt minions you probably want to run. But you could at least try, because 2 of the corrupt cards are the insights that draw you a minion anyway. So it seems like that's got the potential to come together into something absolutely crazy from time to time. And when decks can steal wins and still be competitive outside of the moments they steal those wins, that's a great sign for a deck's success. So I'm thinking some kind of grindy, control, corrupt Priest is a real possibility here with Dark Inquisitor Xanesh, and I'm stupidly excited to try it out because it seems like it's going to be really, really fun. So next up here is Rally, a new res card for Priest and Paladin here in dual class. A little bit different spin on this one though. It's 4 mana, and it resurrects a friendly 1 cost, 2 cost, and 3 cost minion. So basically, if you hit the perfect curve here, playing a 1, 2, and 3 drop on curve, you get to just reload all of those on turn 4 for a really nice board. Basically, you're getting 6 mana in stuff for 4 mana. You could also have synergies amongst those minions. Think about, say, like Murlocs, playing a few Murlocs on curve, a War Leader on 3, bring it all back. It's going to be a nice big buffed board that's really synergistic. So you could see some class like Paladin utilizing that really well. For Priest, on the other hand, it's all about those high health tempo minions like we saw already. This could be a way to get those boards really stabilized to make sure you have enough stuff around to keep buffing and keep utilizing heals in that board balance. So, this is not like the crazy big scary res Priest stuff, because this is clearly bringing back a specific limited set of things, which is bad if you're trying to play like a big res Priest, but it might be really good if there are specific minions you want to bring back. So you could even think about this in like a weird like combo world where you run 3 specific spell damage minions. You use this to bring them all back simultaneously at a little bit of a discount and do who knows what. That's not something we'd normally see in Paladin or Priest, but an example of the kinds of shenanigans I think you could get up to with a card like this. I think it has like traditional just tempo advantages, just getting a bunch of stuff for 4 mana really efficiently, and that's going to be amazing. And then I think it also has some interesting potential synergistic plays as well. So this card to me looks like it's potentially really, really good. I think it could do a handful of different things. Might be technically better in other classes, but I still think Paladin in particular and Priest can probably find a home for this one. So next up here, we have a Hunter card, Saddle Master. 3 mana, 3/4. My beloved stat line, although these days certainly not enough on its own to get cards there. It seems like all 3 drops are 3/4s. It reads, after you play a beast, add a random beast to your hand. So a way here to chain into lots of beast value. which, you know, I love value, but the problem is Hunter has not traditionally been a class that does really well with value style cards. They like higher pressure game plans. I don't know that we've seen enough to change that in Hunter recently. So I don't know that Saddle Master makes a lot of sense there. Beyond that, random beasts are pretty darn bad. We've seen some teased classic rework stuff, so maybe we get rid of some of the bad beasts like the Silverback Patriarchs of the world. But on average, beasts just don't really do anything extra special. Very occasionally, you're going to get high rolls. Beyond that, the average cost of a beast is not like super low, like Murlocs, for instance. So the option to like chain through multiple beasts off of a single Saddle Master, a la you've got your Underbelly Angler style in Murloc, I don't think Saddle Master does that nearly as well. Because first off, it's more expensive itself, and the average beast is going to be way more expensive than the average Murloc, and beasts aren't naturally as synergistic with one another as Murlocs are. So basically, this is just like a worse version of that sort of card. I don't think it fits the archetypes we traditionally see in its class, and I don't even know if it's really all that great, even just on its own in a value hunter deck, if that existed. I just don't know if it has enough output or consistency. So all in all, Saddle Master looks like a really weak card to me. Moving on to Shenanigans. I love Shenanigans. It's a new rogue secret for 2 mana. When your opponent draws their second card in a turn, transform it into a banana. So remember, your opponent's always drawing one card naturally off of their draw, and then as soon as they draw a second one, well, boom, that card gets turned into a banana. And rarely ever will your opponent really be able to control what that card is that they draw. So of course you can turn something they love into a banana. Turn their treasured legendary combo piece. It's now a banana. And of course, Shenanigans isn't always going to activate. Sometimes your opponents will not draw an extra card, which may seem like you played a secret for nothing. But do keep in mind that Rogue doesn't necessarily hate having secrets active for some of their secret synergy cards like the Blackjack Stunners. So having that consistent secret you know you can rely on can be an advantage in some cases. And then this is probably eventually going to hit. Most classes do eventually need to draw some cards, and then you try to high roll it rather nicely. The question, of course, is will this be played in tempo rogue decks? Are they more interested in their own stuff or disrupting their opponent's stuff? I think they're probably more interested in their own stuff. So the dirty tricks style secrets that are drawing their own cards or more tempo based secrets might be more advantageous for rogue to dictate their own game plan as opposed to sort of disrupting their opponents. So you may just not see this card make the cut even in a secret rogue list because they just don't care enough about what their opponent's doing without additional secret trigger style cards like the Blackjack Stunners. That guaranteed pocket secret being available may not matter. So I don't think this card necessarily gets played a lot. I think it's fine, but I think it's certainly awesome off of things like Hanar, Random Generation. This will still be a very impactful card in Hearthstone. It's going to matter. It's going to make some great moments, but it's probably not played in a lot of deck lists in my mind. Moving on to the Spark Joy cheat. Speaking of secret synergy cards, we got a nice little 3-mana 3/3 here for Rogue. Battle Cry, if you're holding a secret, cast it and draw a card. And yeah, I mean, this looks awesome. You've got a great way to pull secrets out for free. So you save 2 mana with the Spark Joy cheat. That's awesome. And then it's replenishing your hand. So you're not losing that resource advantage. You're still gaining some resources, and you're also changing what's in your hand as well. So the only downside here for Spark Joy cheat is if you have multiple secrets, you may not necessarily get the one you want if you're playing this on curve, but I don't think that's necessarily a big problem at all. I think you're just happy to get a really efficient card. You're just moving through your deck, you're getting a secret in play, you're getting a body in play. All of those are awesome things. So secret rogues, which are already a solid archetype, seem like they'd love Spark Joy cheat. Next up here is the Spiked Wheel, a new warrior weapon. It's a 0/2 for 1 mana. And it reads, has +3 attack while your hero has armor. So just a conditional +3. You got armor, it's got +3. You don't have armor, you got a 0 attack weapon. And clearly a 3/2 for 1 mana is amazing, right? Like that's a fantastic stat line for 1 mana. Would help you keep up a ton with early game boards. It also has this nice natural hero power. You play this on 1, you hero power on 2. You got yourself a Fiery War Axe ready to go on turn 2. And you still got to hero power as well. So there are clearly some lines and upsides here. The only challenge for this necessarily is beyond that, right? Like if you're starting to play this later in a game, Yes, of course, it's super easy to flex into a turn, but does it have enough value compared to other weapons that Warrior could run instead? If you're sitting on like an 8 mana turn, you may not have a lot to do anyway. You just rather have a Reaper's Scythe than a Spiked Wheel because you just need to be able to do more with your weapon. You value the cleave or whatever other weapons are available, right? Sometimes they just do a lot more than something like a Spiked Wheel. So I don't know if the like early game upside of this, which is very obvious and powerful, is enough to overcome the just kind of resource or value that Warrior generally trends towards. Super, super cheap cards like this with lower output aren't always something that they're able to utilize well. And then if you think about this in an aggro context, of course, I don't think this is great in an aggro deck. Like, of course, they'd love a 1 mana 3/2 weapon, but they're not going to be hero powering on 2. They're generally going to be playing minions. It's going to be hard to actually get to the point where you have that armor. You're not going to run armor vendor in an aggro deck because you don't want to armor your opponent. So I think this is very limited to a more defensively minded Warrior deck. And then in those instances, I don't know if it goes quite far enough because it's only going to be good maybe exactly in the mulligan or play it on turn 1, maybe on turn 3. Sometimes it'll be fine. But as you get later and later in the game, this one falls off really hard. And it's hard to envision the right meta or the right kind of deck breakdown or deck build that fits this one perfectly as opposed to other Warrior weapons, which I think just do more. So this one's tough for me. Like, it's got a lot of promise. I just think it might fall through the gaps a little more than people are expecting. I should also note Warrior did get the new poison dual class card that buffs your weapon. This is a really cheap weapon to buff if you want to run like weapon buff style stuff with upgrade. I don't know that it's better though than just another weapon you'd get later in the game, or just an upgrade itself is a 1 mana 1/3 weapon might be better to build off of. So I don't really think that is an angle for Spiked Wheel necessarily either. So next up here is Conjure Mana Biscuit, a 2 mana spell, and it's for Mage. It'll add a biscuit to your hand that refreshes 2 mana crystals. So the biscuit presumably will be a 0 mana spell, kind of like an old school Innervate, but different in one important way. It does not gain you mana crystals, it refreshes them. So you could not use this to ramp to a, like, you know, if you played this on 2, you couldn't then on turn 3 ramp to 5 mana and play a 5 mana card by gaining 2 mana crystals. It's only refreshing those mana crystals. So if you were on turn 3, you could play a 3 mana card, go down to 0, then play your mana biscuit, refresh 2, and then play a 2 mana card. You could spend 5 mana, but you couldn't play a 5 mana card. An important distinction, but nonetheless, I think a really neat, flexible tool that can allow you to do shenanigans in Mage. Mage likes to be able to do things with cheap spells. We've got all those kind of mana cyclone payoff sorts of cards. So having something like a biscuit in hand could really help you blow up on a mana cyclone turn, or with mana giants, just giving you multiple cheap spells. The mana biscuit itself starts chaining things together in really interesting ways. There's also a lot of potential, I think, with like combos. We're going to talk about a combo card here in a second, I suspect, where you want to spend more than 10 mana in a turn. A couple mana biscuits being loaded up in hand means you could spend up to 14 mana. So things like Malagos plus whatever damage spells become a real possibility where you've got some mana biscuits that you've banked up over the course of the game. So for me, I think this card has a lot of interesting angles to be played. I wouldn't be surprised at all if this became a somewhat frustrating card to deal with. As we know, mana cheat tends to be pretty bonkers, and there's a fair bit of mana cheat here. So moving on to another Mage card and a Shaman card, dual class here. It's the Imprisoned Phoenix, a 2 mana 2/3 elemental, and it's dormant for 2 turns, and then it has spell damage +2. So this is a very intriguing card. The spell damage +2, I think, is rather scary because it allows you to set up guaranteed spell damage for a future turn. And this is like something we were already trying to do in the past with Maiev, where you'd build like spell damage minions, you'd hide it with Maiev so that you'd have a future turn set up where you could go off like crazy with a bunch of burst damage. Imprisoned Phoenix just has that built in. So you could dump 2 of these, wait a couple turns, and you've got, you know, a Malagos Light on board ready to go with a full mana allotment to have +4 spell damage queued up ready to go. And that to me is pretty scary. I think there's a lot of potential in those sorts of plays as long as you're willing to play 2 of these. Even one of these could still be some pretty crazy burst damage. to set up a combo. So I think Mage and Shaman obviously both have a lot of burst damage spells that could utilize this rather nicely. And I think there's a couple combo decks in the making here. Now, the thing about combo decks is, they're not always going to be like tier 1, top of the meta sort of stuff. So this may not be the strongest card in the set, but I think it will be something that helps define those sort of combo archetypes. Even if they're tier 3 or 4, this could be a really fundamental card there. Now, outside of that, there's probably still some general utility in this, just spending 2 mana for free and having some spell damage down the road to set up an AoE on key turns, or just to find a little bit of extra chip damage in a deck. I think this has some bare utility there that's fine, but it's really that combo aspect that scares me. So I would definitely keep an eye on Imprisoned Phoenix. Moving on to the Runaway Blackwing here, new 9 mana 9/9 dragon. At the end of your turn, deal 9 damage to a random enemy minion. So it's a Ragnaros that only hits minions instead of face, and he's 9s instead of 8s. And you know what? This is cool. I don't think this is a card that's often going to be good enough in constructed, because there's just too many little minions laying around on every given turn. 1/1s everywhere. I don't think that's even going to change after lackeys leave. There's just a lot of little stuff. And that means often 9 damage is just going to hit a minion. And this doesn't have that upside of Rag, where it's like if you clear their board, Rag's going to go face. So not a lot of upside here in this card. Maybe some dragon synergies here and there. This gets added to a lot of dragon discover pools, which is relevant. But I don't think this will be added to many decks in and of itself. Probably a great arena card, etc., etc. Just not a fantastic constructed card. Moving on to the Resizing Pouch. This is a cool card design. 1 mana, discover a card with cost equal to your remaining mana crystals. So you play this at 10 mana, you're going to spend 1, which means you're going to discover 9 mana cards. You're going to get like Ysera Unleashed in Druid, or the guy we just looked at sometimes as well, because remember, Discover is not biased to class cards anymore. But you can get some big stuff, right? And that could be really cool for Hunter in particular. You're late in the game, you don't have anything to do, you top deck this sucker, you're going to have some big tools and some big stuff to do. Maybe hero power, find yourself a 7-drop, etc. Pretty cool card in that regard. But it's just a really flexible spell. I think even like Druid could use this at 1 mana. So they go down to 0 just to find like an extra Moonfire for a combo or something. Wouldn't be guaranteed, I don't think, based on the current assortment of 0 mana cards, but it would be pretty likely to find a Moonfire or Lightning Bloom for later. So you could use Resizing Pouch to set up like combo turns in the future. So, the question is it going to be directed enough or good enough to like make the cut to beat out other cards, because obviously it has to fight for its spot in a list? Or is it just going to be a little bit too generic in its results? The Discover results won't be good enough to really make it better than any other card. In other words, does the flexibility of this outweigh the consistency of other cards? That's a much harder question to answer. So this card I think is fine. It does some interesting stuff, but I have a feeling it'll often be just left out because people are like, well, yeah, I don't know, it just doesn't do what I need it to do necessarily or consistently enough. So there's not really a reason for the Resizing Pouch. Now, another 1 mana dual class card. There's a ton of these. Oh my god, I love that dual class is back, by the way. It's Guidance here for Shaman and Druid. 1 mana spell. It allows you to look at 2 spells, add 1 to your hand, or you can overload 1 to get both of the spells. Now, I actually don't yet know where these spells come from. I did a quick check on Twitter. I didn't see any confirmation. I don't know if they're from your deck or just random spells. I think they are just random spells of your class, because it doesn't say look at 2 spells from your deck. It also doesn't say discover, because it's not an option of 3. There's only going to be 2. So assume it's like discover with random stuff. That's my assumption, at least. Unless somebody can correct me, please do in the comments if you have confirmation somewhere. Let me know. You'll be seeing this 15-20 minutes later than me anyway. So anyway, 2 random spells, and you can choose one, because that's the one you need. It's awesome. Or if you just want to take an overload of 1, which is really not that punishing, you can get both spells instead. So a great little 1 mana generate 2, and it's got the upside of being spells that you decide on in the moment. So you can pick things that are really helpful for your matchup or your game plan. And I think that's really, really powerful. You could easily see this being slotted into either Shaman or Druid. In many cases, Druid loves cheap spells. Sometimes Shaman just needs stuff for generation and control decks. So not every deck is going to run this, but you could see it popping into a handful here and there and being a pretty strong option. All right, so next appears the Fellfire Deadeye, dual class card for Demon Hunter and Hunter, 2 mana, 2/3. Your hero power costs 1 less. So you stick this on board. Demon Hunter's hero power goes down to 0. That's what we need. And Hunter's hero power going down to 1. We have both of those classes certainly have hero power synergies to realize. So if this stuck on board for multiple turns, you could really start to reap some benefits over time. The problem is I don't think it's very likely to stick on board for multiple turns. And in that case, you're spending 2 mana for a 2/3 here that may not always even realize the upside of the hero power. Like, if it's played on turn 2 for Demon Hunter, if there's nothing for you to trade into, it's like, okay, 1 extra face damage on a 2 mana 2/3. Not really that exciting, right? It's like later in the curve. I feel like you could be doing more for your mana, just more efficient output. And I think that's the biggest problem for this card. It's just got this 2 mana overhead for like a potential discount upside for a little bit of extra damage squeezed in. I don't think that's enough to make this card relevant or good enough compared to other just more aggressive 2-drops and other ways to pump out more damage. This one just doesn't feel clean enough or efficient enough for me. So moving on here to the Mist Runner for Shaman, a 5 mana 4/4. And Battlecry, give a friendly minion +3/+3 with an overload of 1. So kind of a total cost of 6 delayed. But interesting little buff card here. It's definitely got Bone Mare vibes of old. Bone Mare was really, really good in its day. And this is really not that far off from a stat standpoint. And notably cheaper as well, particularly pre-overload. So, I with totems laying around all the time, this card's pretty intriguing to me. It's like, man, this could be a pretty good like turn 5 follow-up in a more aggressive tempo-based deck that's got minions on board already. That's a lot of damage pushing in and still developing an extra body on top of that. Could be pretty nice. It's got like, those Fungal Mancer vibes like that too. Maybe not quite as good as Fungal Mancer because you'd probably rather have the stats in play than the stats on the minion, or stats from the buff basically than the stats on the minion. So I'd rather have the +4/+4 and a 2/2 than the 4/4 and a +3/+3. If that makes sense. But nonetheless, I wouldn't be totally shocked if this popped into a pressure deck as a great way to get some extra damage or just take good trades. Also, keep in mind, we just have rush minions everywhere. So just getting like a small rush minion on board and buffing it with a Mist Runner to take a cleaner trade is absolutely a thing you could see and a real possibility for a card like this one. So keep an eye out for Mist Runner. This might be a sleeper solid card. So next up here, we have Backfire for Warlock, a new 3 mana spell, draws 3 cards and deals 3 damage to your hero. So draw 3 for 3, clearly better than average. And I can actually see this being a replacement in something like a Pain Zoo Warlock, which is currently a tier 1 deck. Could replace Hand of Gul'dan. I don't know that it's necessarily better, but dealing damage yourself is an advantage in that deck. And you're spending 2 mana often or 4 mana to discard that Hand of Gul'dan anyway. You could move away from that discard package. Maybe just use this instead and double up and double down on dealing damage to yourself for upside for drawing your cards instead. So whether this is just, in a hand lock to just draw a ton of stuff and accelerate your card draw a bunch, or in that Pain Warlock to support refilling your hand, which is a very powerful asset in that deck, Backfire seems pretty efficient. I mean, dealing 3 to yourself is not a big price to pay for very efficient card draw. Of course, Warlock has access to a lot of card draw, so it just has to find the right deck where this makes more sense than other options. That's the challenge, but I think it could definitely find one. Moving on here to the Crab Rider, a 2 mana 1/4 Murloc with Rush and Wind Fury. So Murloc here, it's pretty good at dealing with early game boards and scales really nicely with any Murloc attack buffs. Get a War Leader on here, you could definitely clean up some pretty big minions on your opponent's side of the board. So that's really intriguing. This is also very important off of random Murloc generation. You got your McGurgle Prime, giving yourself an extra minion here that can trade into stuff can definitely be helpful, stabilizing those sorts of turns. Now, will this be a staple in Murloc decks? And will Murloc decks be good? Potentially. Murlocs have certainly popped into the meta from time to time, and with a 4 health body here, even if you're not trading in it immediately, this is just a nice sticky Murloc. And sometimes it's hard to get Murloc health to hang around on board so that you can buff it later. This has that nice health total compared to most 2 mana Murlocs. So whether you're trading it in or just trying to stick something that's going to last for a couple turns and then buff it and follow up on it, Crab Rider, it's interesting. I don't think this is going to be a meta dominant card, but I could definitely see it popping into a real deck. Moving on here to Hysteria, 3 mana, Warlock and Priest, dual class spell here. You choose a minion, and then that minion will attack random minions until it dies. So kind of like Deathwing Mad Aspect, but you're picking the minion. So ideally, right, your opponent has like an 8/8 on board and 2 5/5s, and you Hysteria the 8/8, it attacks the 2 5/5s, and you've cleared the board really efficiently for 3 mana. Now, of course, this is pretty useless if your opponent just has an 8/8 on board, because you're not going to actually be able to do anything. You could, of course, play your own minions that don't have rush, and then like use this to kind of force them to trade into your stuff to clean something up in pure desperation. But there will be board states where this is a little bit too awkward of a removal tool. There will be other board states where this is just hyper efficient and works out really, really well. So it's kind of hard for me to guess just how good this one's going to be, because there's so many different board states. My thoughts are there's enough like mixed stat board states where there's a bunch of like 1/1s and 2/2s lingering around, and then something bigger joins the fray where you could target that big thing and probably clean up a lot of boards. So I think this could be a solid pseudo AoE card for Priest. My suspicion is that Warlock probably already has great options. There's things like Cascading Disaster to deal with those sort of mid-game board states, or just old school Hellfires and such. Priest is lacking a little bit more when it's those mixed stats. Like, they're good at anything that's 2 health or less, but as you get beyond that, they kind of have a gap from those Holy Novas to those Soul Mirrors. It feels like Hysteria could maybe fill in that gap a little bit. So I don't know if this is going to make sense in Warlock as much, but it might make more sense in Priest. Now, there's a side bonus to this. You can choose your own minions. Be mindful if you have things like Death Rattle minions that you want to kill off. So this could enable slower Death Rattle minions to actually still find success, because you use your own Death Rattle minion to trade into your opponent's stuff while activating your Death Rattle. So that's another little aspect here that could pop into relevance, but I think less likely than just using this as its probably base utility, which is more of a removal tool, because you don't always want to trade in your own stuff. You kind of want your own stuff hanging around and living on board as much as possible. Next up, here's the Fell Saber, a 4 mana 5/6 demon for Demon Hunter. And this one can only attack if your hero attacked this turn. And, usually Demon Hunter is attacking. That's not a big condition necessarily for the Fell Saber to beat. It's like 1 mana usually that you have to spend to activate this one. I don't think that's asking a lot. The challenge is I just don't think the upside on this card is nearly high enough. It's only a 5/6. And compared to all the other broken, crazy things Demon Hunter can do, I don't think an extra 1/1 in stats is worth having any condition at all. And there's just faster damage output, way crazier things. This feels so slow compared to the normal Demon Hunter kit. I just don't think Fell Saber makes any sense for the class. This, in my mind, virtually never gets played. And then moving on to Illidari Studies, a 1 mana spell for Demon Hunter. A Studies is coming back, which is cool. In this one, you discover an Outcast card, and then, of course, your next Outcast card will cost 1 less. And obviously, Demon Hunter has some amazing Outcast cards. I don't think there's too many discovers where you get something, or you get 3 options that are just completely useless to you. I think you'll always find something that's relatively valuable. Worst case is just like some cheap cycle or some heal, right? It's very rarely going to completely whiff, or maybe never completely whiff, at least based on the current card set. And the cool thing is this naturally places the card in Outcast position. So you can either use this to like set up for later, or you could just immediately play that Outcast card and realize the Outcast benefit on it right away. So just a nice little way for Demon Hunter to spend some mana and cycle and find certain things that fit matchups really well. Now, I like this card a lot. I think it makes a ton of sense, but so far Demon Hunter's been very directed in its gameplay. Like, they have very specific game plans to execute, and there hasn't been a lot of room for just kind of random generation and discover and all these other things. So if Demon Hunter stays as like pure to its game plan as it always has, if decks don't rely a little bit more on value generation, this may not make sense. You just have so much card draw on Demon Hunter, you just get the cards you want. You don't need to like randomly figure out other ones. So that's the real risk and the challenge for this card to overcome. It just sort of depends on how Demon Hunter evolves over time, I think. As it stands, what we've seen Demon Hunter in the past, I don't think this would get played much in normal Demon Hunter lists. Moving forward, that could possibly change. So next up here is the Bola Shot for Hunter, 2-mana spell. Deal 1 damage to a minion and 2 damage to its neighbors. So a little bit of a fixed combustion here at the 2-mana spot for Hunter. And yeah, I think that's a stat line for removal that will very often connect pretty meaningfully. Even if it's just a few 1/1s, you're fine. And then occasionally you clean up some 2 health stuff, you're pretty happy. So a nice little card for Hunter to keep their opponent's boards in check, sure. The question, as it is often the question, is what deck's this going into, right? What kind of Hunter wants to have control tools like this one, or would they rather just play minions and try to dictate the tempo and initiative instead of responding to it? That's usually how Hunter plays. Now, this does scale really interestingly with spell damage, so maybe there's some angles there. I've been looking for Varisa to get good for a really long time since I revealed her, and she still hasn't been good. So, cards like this always have a chance to pop into something that's a little slower, or a deck that needs more spells and doesn't have as many minions, right? This could be a great thing for like a Maxima big Hunter that needs to keep up until they get to their late game. So keep an eye on it, but generally not a card I think that fits Hunter particularly well. All right, so next up here is Arbor Up, a 5-mana spell for Druid. It is a treant synergy card. Summon 2/2/2 treants and then give your minions +2/+1. So basically this is summoning you 2 4/3s for 5 mana, which frankly isn't really that bad at a base level. That's kind of annoying for some decks to deal with, particularly if you've been ahead throughout the course of the early game. This is a great way to follow up. And if you have any additional minions on board, of course, this is a crazy buff on any additional minions. So you're kind of re-stabilizing your board with extra stuff and then following up on a big board. And sometimes this could just be like the lethal push you need. You stuck 3 or 4 minions last turn, this and a Savage Roar, GG, right? You don't even care about the extra minions. So I like the dual utility of this card quite well, because often when you're playing Treant or Token Druid, which we've been doing actually a fair bit this week, you feel like you've got cards that are good at reloading, and you've got cards that are good at following up. And sometimes you have the wrong ones. Like you need reload, but you've got all follow up, or you need follow up and you've got all reload. I think it's nice that this card fuses the two together so that it's much better in a pinch. It can be good at both. It can be, one or the other basically. And I think that might shore up some of the weaknesses I've identified in Treant Druids. And it's already an okay deck. So would this card be enough to push it to the next level? Quite possibly it could be. Moving on to the Glacier Racer, 1-mana 1/3 for Mage. Spellburst, deal 3 damage to all frozen minions. So a great little way to deal some additional damage while freezing things. It's a one-time effect. So, I think we saw in the teaser video this being used with Frost Nova. You play a Glacier Racer, and it's hard to say, you play a Frost Nova, and it helps you not only freeze the board but clear it. And that's certainly intriguing. There's also Blizzard, of course. This could like increase the oomph of your Blizzard, making it deal 5 instead of 2. And then you've got single target freezes, obviously, as well. I don't know though that that's necessarily what you want when you're freezing stuff. Usually you're freezing stuff just to buy time or stall it out, and you're going to deal with it later, right? You're going to Reno it later. You're going to Flame Strike it later. You're going to keep it frozen forever. And I don't know that dealing 3 damage to things is particularly extra helpful for at least a card in hand. I mean, obviously, if it's free, you're happy to do it, but you've got to have that card in hand. This is taking the place of something else that you could be doing instead. And that makes me a little more iffy with it. I don't know that it's worth it. Now, I will say this also hits your enemy's face, so it's like maybe a little bit of extra chip damage and like a burn freeze mage sort of thing, where you're just trying to get them down low enough to kill them later on a combo turn. And while you're frostbolting their face, this just tosses in an extra 3 damage at some point in the game. Frost Nova obviously won't deal damage to them because they're not going to be frozen, but a Frostbolt would. So, or whatever other single target freeze, obviously. But I just don't know that this adds enough extra. Because if it was just Spellburst, deal 3 damage to all enemies, obviously that would be completely broken. That would be insane. But it's specifically the freeze that's hanging me up on this one. And I feel like when I'm freezing, I'm not going to care as much about dealing that extra damage. And I'd rather just have another card in hand. That said, though, the numbers are really big. And this is a big output for a 1-mana card. So will the conditionality and the kind of weird direction of it, the almost anti-synergy, I'd call it. It's not really, but feels that way. Will that be enough to hold back the big numbers? I don't know. I think you guys probably like this card more than I do, but I'm not super high on it. Now, I am high on this card, the Libram of Judgment for Paladin. It's a 7-mana 5/3 weapon, and the Corrupt gives it lifesteal. I don't have the corrupted artwork here, but when it's corrupted, it's just going to be a lifesteal 5/3. And a lifesteal 5/3 weapon's really nice. Is it 7 mana nice? No, but of course, it's a Libram. It's a Libram, so it gets discounted. That means it's not going to be 7 mana. It's going to be like 4 mana or 3 mana, even 2 mana sometimes. And a 2 mana 5/3 lifesteal weapon is absolutely bonkers. Obviously, that's not only a ton of pressure output, it could be great to clear up minions, just keep you alive in a pinch. I mean, that's amazing. And of course, it's not going to be hard to corrupt either if you're already discounting it. It's notably less mana than Libram of Hope, so that's a pretty natural discount option for the Libram of Judgment. I think this fits just perfectly well into Libram decks, and Libram decks are already good, so Libram of Judgment seems very, very strong to me. Next up here is Ironclad for Warrior, a 3-mana 2/4 mech. With a battle cry, if your hero has armor, gain +2/+2. So in that case, it would be a 3-mana 4/6 mech. And I mean, obviously 3-mana 4/6, really solid stat line for its cost. But it's not always gonna be a 4/6. And if you are like playing on turns where this is more like guaranteed, say like 5 mana where you know you can armor up and play an Ironclad, then you're kind of looking at like a 5 mana 4/6 that gives you 2 armor. It's like, I don't know, I'm really all that excited about that. That doesn't seem that good. It's just stats at the end of the day. It has some mech synergies potentially, but it just doesn't feel like it's doing enough. If it had like Rush or something, of course, it'd be awesome. But without that, it just feels like a body you're throwing down. So, there's like the sort of Ringmaster decks, the Menagerie aggro stuff, or maybe this is just that big pile of stats you need for your mech. There's also like N'Zoth things, but I think you can get bigger, better mechs if you're playing for a late game N'Zoth. So this just kind of feels hopeless or lifeless. Like it's just sort of a thing that's not really gonna go anywhere or really be helpful for a control deck that's relying on armor a bunch. I'm just not sold that the stats here do enough. And then finally, I believe, it's our last card, Death Warden here, new neutral minion. It's an epic 3-mana 2/5. Death Rattles can't trigger. So we got here a Death Rattle tech answer. That's pretty crazy to see. But unfortunately, I just don't know if that's something we need at the moment, or really if that's something you're ever going to need as a minion, because it can just be killed, right? Like your opponent's just like, oh, okay, you played a 2/5. I'm just going to kill that and then still activate my Death Rattles. I don't envision a lot of worlds where this is like super great at denying your opponent's Death Rattles, or at least, maybe for a turn or two, but does that make the difference to swing a game? So, I love the tech cards exist. I think it's cool to have in Hearthstone. I don't see this one being an especially impactful one. I can't envision a lot of worlds where Death Rattles are so urgent or so just stupidly impactful that just tossing this into your deck and giving up a slot in your deck for a card like Death Warden would really make sense. There is noteworthy some bad Death Rattles in the game, and maybe there's some decks that would want to use this to prevent their own Death Rattles from going off. There's a little bit more control there sometimes, so that could be a thing. But even then, that's so weird. I don't think it's worth it. So all in all, doesn't seem like a particularly compelling card. Dark Inquisitor Xanesh is a 5-star card. Bola Shot is a 3-star card. Arbor Up is a 4-star card. Glacier Racer is a 3-star card. Libram of Judgment is a 5-star card. Ironclad is a 2-star card. Death Warden is a 2-star card. Illidari Studies is a 3-star card. Fell Saber is a 1-star card. Crab Rider is a 3-star card. Backfire is a 4-star card. Mist Runner is a 3-star card. Fellfire Deadeye is a 2-star card. Guidance is a 4-star card. Resizing Pouch is a 3-star card. Runaway Blackwing is a 2-star card. Spiked Wheel is a 3-star card. Spark Joy Cheat is a 4-star card. Shenanigans is a 3-star card. Saddlemaster is a 1-star card. Imprisoned Phoenix is a 4-star card. Conjure Mana Biscuit is a 4-star card. Hysteria is a 4-star card. And there you go, folks. 35 new cards reviewed all in one day. Crazy set of reveals here for Darkmoon Races. These come out really soon, so stay tuned for some decks built around things like Dark Inquisitor Xanash here. I'm personally looking forward to it a ton. Of course, share your thoughts on these cards. What do you think? What do you like? What do you hate? I want to hear it all. Leave those thoughts in the comments below. But until then, thanks much, as always, for watching. And until next time, game on.